Okay, guys, so today's video is basically going over Seth Feroce did a video that was called a rant about TRT versus steroids. And so I watched the whole video and I want to give my thoughts on it as well. Because Seth Feroce, obviously, he's notable. He was an IFBB pro bodybuilder, a really good one. He came off cycle, and I think he still does TRT. He still does testosterone. He's been very open about that. But he came off because he was having some health issues and he just wanted to live healthier, having a family, kids, wife, everything. Your priorities change, especially as you get into your 30s. I don't know exactly how old he is, but we share a similar perspective. Obviously, I came from the powerlifting world, he came from the bodybuilding world. And there's some differences in what we've done since, changing our lifestyle and our approach. But he's got a very similar perspective, having taken all the things, blasted, gone hard to be the best that he could be at his chosen sport. So I saw his video and I wanted to give my thoughts on it. And he's obviously very well respected for his openness. And in this video, his one of his main arguments was TRT is not just it's not 250 milligrams a week. That's not true TRT, and TRT dosage can vary depending on the person. Like what level 250 milligrams a week might raise one person to, it might raise somebody else to a completely different level. So I know for me, I responded pretty favorably to where I could take like 125 milligrams of testosterone and it would bump my levels up around like 1400 nanograms per deciliter. Whereas someone else might take 350 milligrams to get to that same level. And there is a caveat where you should check the levels roughly 2 to 3 days after injection to know the most accurate level. So if you got your levels checked a week after your shot, they're going to be way lower than 2 or 3 days after. So that is one thing that can cause that variability. But he's right about this. It's, people process things differently. So it's similar to how I might react on a certain substance would be different than how someone else would react. Like Tren makes me extremely irritable, and all this sort of stuff. I get angry very easily, and whereas I know people who are completely mellow on it. So it's the same thing. TRT has become kind of a catch-all phrase for a 250 milligram a week dosage, when that's not really TRT. Let's say the normal natural testosterone level is anywhere between 200 nanograms per deciliter up to 900 to 1,000 even. Well, for most people, it's going to take a very small amount of testosterone to get into that range. It could be 75 milligrams a week. It could be 100. So 250 for a lot of people is really ramping things up to a super physiological level. That's the big difference there. Now, another thing, one of his points was, I got him kind of cliff noted here, you pay the consequences for what you do, for what you take. So he's like, don't go crying about what happens if you choose to take anabolics. If you choose to go down that road, then you reap what you sow. You're going to have to deal with the health consequences or whatever else. And he even says, like, he's pretty fortunate as far as not having anything too terrible happen to him. He's still alive, obviously, and thriving now. And it's kind of the same for me. You look at a guy like Dallas McCarver, who was 26 years old. He was the same age I was, and he passed away from a massive heart attack. And obviously, he was maybe doing things beyond what I was doing to an even more extreme standard. But that's very unlucky. Most bodybuilders are not going to pass away at 26, although we've seen in recent years guys passing away younger and younger in their 30s, 20s, whatever. So, we reap what we sow. You have to understand there are consequences to this. They're not good for you from a health perspective. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious here. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows they play the biggest role on your heart, secondarily your kidneys and liver. Yes, on orals and such, but that tends to rebound very quickly. But the heart damage, hard to say. I want to look into this more extensively later on with a full Clearly scan. A Clearly scan is like a CT angiogram that shows your soft and hard plaque in your arteries. It's the most comprehensive check you can do of your heart, and it's something I want to get done. Obviously, my blood work parameters look much better nowadays, being off for 3 years. I've been off even testosterone. So anabolic steroids and testosterone, I've been off all of that for over 3 years now. I came off in November of 2020. Most of you guys know this story. And I just got the levels checked. It was 319 was my total testosterone level on the day I checked them. So I'm pretty fortunate as well. Nothing major as of yet. But it's very hard to say the long-term ramifications and consequences of what we did to ourselves. So, you got to be careful. It's when you're 20 years old, it's easy to make these decisions where you're like, hey, I'll do this, throw caution to the wind, whatever. But you don't really see down the line a decade later what did that do to me. It's the same with smoking. People smoke and they take drugs and stuff, and they're 20 years old and they say whatever, it doesn't really matter, I'll be fine. And you don't know what that's going to do to you long term or how it's going to affect you. And you might not be one of the lucky ones who gets away with it. You might pass away, God forbid. So that's a really fair point. He also says it's respectable when people do not say their dosages because they don't want people to copy them. And I think that's a very fair point. People who say, yes, I take this or I take that, but I'm not going to say my dosages, which is what Chris Bumstead does, I think. Because he doesn't want everyone going, oh, I want to be like Chris Bumstead, knowing full well that they're going to copy his exact cycle. I think that's fair. I do think a lot of guys downplay dosage. We've seen this time and time again where guys say, I've never done that. I've never done anything crazy. I'm not one of the crazy guys who takes all the high doses. Most people who go down this rabbit hole get curious at some point with what more would do to their physique, what harsher compounds would do to their physique, and they do take more. So that is something that's downplayed to a fairly big extent. But I do think it's also very respectable if someone admits what they're doing and yet does not get into specifics out of safety for the audience and trying to set a good example as far as that goes. So another point, quality can make a difference in terms of dosage, and this is completely true. The stuff I was taking early on was nowhere near as potent as the stuff I got towards the latter end of my time doing this. I had a much better source. I had much better, higher quality of it. So you could take far less and achieve much greater results. And I would say now compared to a decade ago or even 5 years ago, everything is much higher quality. So, we're seeing, and I've seen it with firsthand with clients and such. Most of my guys are natural, but I do have guys who take stuff, and less is more. I've seen it time and time again where guys almost achieve better results by taking less because they don't get all the injuries that come with it. They don't get all the negative side effects. So it's a very common theme I've seen now where you think taking a third of what you used to take would lead to diminished strength gains, but it's actually the opposite because they're in the game longer and they don't get as injured. Now, he also says, one last point I want to touch on, he says he doesn't regret what he did. To some degree, I do somewhat agree with this. Like it led us down the path in life where we've gone. It gave us the hindsight looking back on it and led us to where we are now. I think, he kind of said this as well. There's things maybe you would have done differently. Like I would have been much smarter about it. I would have looked after my health. There was a good run. There was a lot of good stuff that came from it. I definitely don't condone anabolics to anyone. I mean, I look at myself now and I think there's a very strong argument my physique looks better than it did when I was on anabolics and testosterone. And I've been off for 3 years from both. So I kind of short-sighted myself as far as what I was capable of. And I think we do that as well with what we're capable of. The fact of the matter is you can achieve pretty solid strength gains and physique gains from staying drug-free. And I've really opened my own eyes to this. If I would have seen my current physique years ago, I would have said that guy's on TRT at least. That guy's not natural. And now I'm like, or drug-free. If maybe you say you can't call yourself natural if you've been on it all, and that's a very fair argument. So let's say drug-free, over 3 years drug-free. And I would have looked at this physique and said, that's not a drug-free physique. The bicep vein and the size and all that, the leanness. But now it's like, wow, what is actually achievable? And it makes me think, like even Jeffrey Schofield. Jeffrey Schofield is a guy who I think is a prime example of a top-notch, drug-free, natural guy who you guys can look up to. And he looked diced to the socks and looked jacked as can be when he was at the end of his cut there at 194 pounds body weight. I'm 204 pounds right now. He was 194 pounds. I don't know how tall he is, but he looked like he was sauced to the gills and in pictures and video. But I think if you saw him in person, you would have been like, oh, that makes a little more sense. So we have to be careful when we're looking at like pictures, videos, and such of what we, conveying whether someone's natural or not. I do think to some degree, massive traps are a pretty dead giveaway about the status of someone, but it really opened my eyes to like, there's a lot that you can achieve without going down that rabbit hole, and you can do it in a much healthier way. So it's nothing I would ever condone anymore. I am open about what I've done, my experiences, trying to go down a much more healthier path now with cardio, with running, with lifting, with balancing it all. I've talked about the goals for the year, finishing the 100-mile race in 25 hours out in Wyoming, deadlifting 683 pounds, and benching 353 pounds at under 210 pounds body weight. All this sort of stuff. I've talked about these goals, and I think it's much more relatable. Those still might be somewhat extreme numbers to a lot of you guys, but it shows much more attainable strength standpoint and physique. And I truly want you guys to come to this channel and say, that's a physique I can achieve naturally or drug-free. Those are strength numbers I can achieve drug-free. So I hope that's doing that for you and encouraging you. I hope you guys like the video. I'll do more videos commenting on my thoughts on other people's videos and such, and we can do more of this stuff. If you like the video, just give it a thumbs up, please. Subscribe, please. Check out my deadlift program. I got the 12-week deadlift program I released, which I am currently running, and I think it's the best deadlift program out there. Obviously, I'm biased, but I put a lot of work into that, and I think it's going to lead to PRs for tons of people. So check that out below. Share the channel if you think it helps you, and I really just appreciate all you guys.